Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Today's subject is about whether we're happier being single or in relationships. And joining me for this discussion is Bethany Nicole. She's been here before. She comes back regularly. She's one of my relationship experts. I really enjoy talking to her. And before we get started, we're going to do the housekeeping at the top because we're supposed to. I'm Alane. You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session where we kind of look at the things that might be holding you back and you might need to heal. And Bethany Nicole is an astrologist. She's a relationship expert. She's an author. She's been here before, and you can find her at bethanynicole.com. And Bethany, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you back. I'm going to bust us both to start with our relationship to work, because this routinely happens. By the way, we have a deep, dark secret. Bethany and I are both morning people. Yikes. Even though we're both tarot card readers and we're supposed to be like at our best at 2 a.m. in the morning, no, we're routinely exchanging work emails at 6 a.m. in the morning or 5:45 in the morning. And like, well, I'll call it out. And it is, we're both very, we hit the ground running, both of us. And she's here early in the morning with me to discuss this subject. And here's why it's such an important subject. If you learn how to be happy being single, you will never accept the wrong people in your life for long. And this applies to either gender. And it is why, in the Hermit Phase episode, which I suggest you listen to, it is one of the reasons that it does connect you to your intuition, to your ability to choose wisely, to your inner guidance, and into your psychic powers, and often to your life's purpose. It is a stage in spiritual awakening. But even if you're not on a spiritual path, being single can have a great role in maintaining even your relationship health. So learning how to be single is one of the things that can add to your happiness. And then here's where today's topic comes in. When I started to be interested in this, I did some research, and I'm going to be including a link to one of the sources that then connects to multiple studies on this. I found a surprising statistic. There are two groups that register as being the happiest people in westernized societies. And they're not what you might think. The first group that reports a very slightly higher percentage of happiness are married men. And the second group that is almost neck and neck, there was like a percentage point differentiation between the two, are actually single women with no children. So they are the happiest next to men who benefit greatly from the structure of relationships and marriage. But why is it that so many people struggle with the idea of being happy being single? And it's not just about codependency. It really is about needing to spend time with yourself to know yourself. Now, Bethany, we were having a discussion before we got on here about some of the things that led us to consider this. And Bethany was sharing a story about something that she read in the newspaper and her thoughts on it. So I'm going to turn this over to Bethany on that. Would you go back over that Carolyn Hack's situation?
Yeah, I think they reported on it in the New Yorker, if I'm not mistaken, or the New York Times or something like that. But yeah, it was basically a Carolyn Hack's piece that started trending and got a lot of attention because it was a married man, and he was maybe 27, I think, and he had written in saying that he'd been married for 3 or 4 months and that he regretted it, that he didn't like being married, he didn't want to be married. He kind of talked about how his wife kind of checked all the boxes, and there was a lot of pressure from society and their families to kind of go ahead and get married, and that, they thought it would mean something if they didn't. And he kind of just said, like, I just don't like being married at all to anyone. Like, I want to be single. And so then, the article was basically talking about like the same way that being a parent isn't for everyone, marriage is not for everyone. Long-term relationship, that kind of commitment, it's just not for everyone. And so even for, you know, a man to come out and say, like, I did this thing and I regret it. Like, I just wish we hadn't gotten married. And he even said, I think, once we get divorced, which is kind of inevitable at that point, right? It's just like when, not if. He was saying, like, I don't think I'll ever get married. Like, I don't really want to. And so it's just kind of like bringing that into attention of like, it's okay if it's not for you. It's okay if it's not for everybody. And maybe he'll have different types of relationships over his lifetime, or maybe, in 25 years, he'll decide something different. But I think we just have to be okay with whatever works for us in our life, whether that's being single, whether that's looking at long-term relationships. But I think too, you really just nailed it. Like, I really think that is the secret key to relationships in general is like, are you okay by yourself? Are
Understand
you happy?
exactly. If you look to another person to create your personal happiness, they then have a lot of control over it. And then also, one of the things that comes with being single is an understanding of your own emotional needs. And in order for you to ever have a successful relationship, you do have to understand what actually meets your emotional needs. And we can't look to another person to meet all of them. In good relationships, emotional needs are met. But first, we have to understand them. And what I tell my clients is, as an adult, every single person really does need to spend at least 1 year being single to really get to know themselves. That way they have their defining energy in all seasons. They have a good time finding out how to simply be happy without looking to an exterior source from another person, which again, hands your personal happiness over to another person. And it can lead to all forms of control and abuse, which we often see in people trying to, like the person's wife from that Carolyn Hacks article, like she's going to take it personally in all likelihood. What can I do to change? What have I done wrong? Because she really wanted to be married. When in fact, this man simply had gotten married, as most men do. Women get married to try and have a love story. Men frequently get married to try and be responsible. Now, it's not across the board, it's not 100%, nothing ever is. As that story indicates, is that we do have individual needs that first we try and make them fit the template of society and what we were told will fulfill us. But quite frequently, it isn't fulfilling. And when you have relationships after having found happiness with just yourself, what happens is you won't overinvest in the wrong people because you'll recognize it. And since you're not basing your happiness on that other person, but looking to fulfill more within yourself, you'll show the wrong people to the door. And you'll also be able to let relationships that have run their course go if they have. But there's also one more thing on that. If a long-term relationship is very important to you, if you find your happiness first and you are showing the wrong people out the door so that they really do not waste time and you do not perpetually repeat a pattern in broken relationships, you will be perfectly happy as you wait for the person who is right for you. And that's where things like divine pairings and people having soulmates really comes in. And before that, we have a series of what are called karmic partners until such time as we, because karma is actually lessons, we learn the lessons that we need to have the relationships that we need to. Now, I'm single. I've been single for like 5 years. I got out of a long-term relationship. And when we really first started, both of us were incredibly unhealthy people, and I kept getting better. And my ex-partner drank more and more and was very deeply unhappy. And because it was a codependent relationship, he blamed me for literally every part of his unhappiness. And so he was crueler and crueler and crueler to me, including like learning about post-traumatic stress disorder and triggering me on purpose, like confusing me and a couple of other things. And I was just lucky enough that I realized what he was doing late in the relationship, but it left me very damaged afterwards. And so at first, I was really drawn to somebody who fit that exact template, somebody who was abusing multiple substances, who had a history of emotional abuse, who I was really, really aware this is not a fit partner. Logically, I completely got it, but I felt really emotionally compelled to the extent that I was like, this is a symptom of what is called a transference relationship, which is also a rebound relationship. And I was highly aware that it's like, this is an emotional compulsion issue that has to do with damage to my attachment style from an abusive childhood. I need to heal this. And so I put all my work into, until I let that go, I had the logical understanding of no, with this particular human being, please let that go. As I understood I needed to heal something, as I healed, I got happier and happier and remembered that as a kid, I spent profound amounts of time alone, and I rediscovered the ability to be absolutely joyful all by myself. I have all of these solitary activities that they make me so much happier as a human being. And I, with no emotional ties to another person beyond, my grown son, I was able to really focus on what are my interests? What do I want to pursue? What makes me happy? What makes me unhappy? Which was as equally important in understanding. And I would tell you that today I am the happiest I have ever been in my entire adult life. And I am absolutely single. People have expressed interest in me, but it has to be the right person for me. And if it doesn't happen, I'm absolutely incredibly happy by myself. I have a fully functional life. I have good connections with in work and in personal life as well. So it really, really, really benefited me. But as I talk to clients, and Bethany, I'm going to turn this back over to you in a moment for your own experiences. I find that it is a very difficult mindset to get people of either gender to inhabit. If they really think they want a person, it feels like it's punishment to be single. And
Mm.
Bethany and I are doing this particular episode because trying to get a different perspective or approach it from a different angle can free you from punishing relationships and engender in you a feeling of true, actual self-love where you don't accept the wrong people just so you can have somebody by your side. So it breaks the cycle regardless. You may be like me and find that like, yeah, I'm so happy. Why? If I meet the right person, I will consider it. But until such time as I do, I know how to be happy by myself. Nobody else needs to come along and validate me with their love because I have a really happy existence. I have a great job. I have even good professional contacts with people like Bethany. Bethany, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that really is something I work with my clients a lot on because other people bringing you happiness is such an illusion. It is absolutely the other way around. It's your happiness is being reflected back to you by somebody else. And so when you're really full and complete within yourself, and that can take a lot of layers, that can take a lot of exploration and digging down and getting to that feeling, that vibration of just fullness and wholeness, just exactly as you are, no matter what you're doing, who you're with, all of that, just being very complete in that. That's what's bringing in the higher level of partnerships. But you also, when you've worked really hard to achieve that for yourself, you're very protective of it. You don't let other people into it because you're like, no, no, like I've worked really hard to get to this. And, um, like, for example, in the astrology piece, like Cancer is one of the signs that can really a lot of the water signs in general, but definitely like Cancer and Pisces can kind of fall into that of that codependency. It's just sort of more of their watery nature. And so those are a lot of the clients, whether it's their moon sign or their rising sign, if they have it in their top three, it's something that I really work with them on because once they get that sense of stability on their own, they're not interested in letting anyone come in and shake it up. And they're actually able to see that a lot better. But if you're constantly kind of like looking to fill something, you're feeling like you have to have that. But once you kind of get very clear about, well, what do I want? What do I need? What do I need to be feel nurtured and loved? Then not only are you bringing in that type of partnership naturally, you're able to communicate it to somebody else because that's another piece that people just don't know what they actually need. So they're easily bullied into thinking that they have to mold to somebody else's preference. But, like with a Cancer, and Pisces as well, they're just they're very intuitive, they're very empathic. So they're picking up stuff a lot of the time. So it's something I tell them a lot is like your home environment has to be very clean, very like energetically clean. You can't have a lot of chaos, you can't have a lot of fighting. Even things like I had a Cancer moon client who had her like just a closet that had some of her ex's belongings because her ex was out of town. And she had promised she would keep it. And I was like, no, get it out. Like you cannot have that in your space. You have a Cancer moon, you're picking it up constantly. And it was causing the ex to like reach out. Like there were just a lot of layers of entanglement. And so even things like that, where it's like, get your space, your life, your environment, all of it in line. And then you will see how protective you become of that, where you're like, really realizing like what other people's influence on that is. Whereas if you're in that weakened state, that codependent state, you're really just sort of like filling in the gaps and you're not seeing where your own sense of balance is. So you might begin to think that being off balanced is the normal state of being, that codependency. Because again, a lot of codependent people don't even know they're in codependent relationships. They're like, oh no, I'm great. Like, and if I were by myself, I'd be fine. But it's like, would you though? Like if we took this person out of the equation, how would you stand? Like, could you stand? And that's another piece that not just, you know, the Cancer clients, I just use them because that is the sign that usually struggles with it the most. But I use it with a lot of my clients. It's like, it's very small things sometimes that make them feel tied to someone else. Like, well, I don't know, like if something went wrong with the house, I wouldn't know what to do. Or like, I don't understand finances. Or, I mean, it's not even just emotional. Sometimes it's like just these very
No.
simple physical things where it's like, you would figure that out. Like, I will help you figure that out. Like, I will give you a list
I
of
do that
resources
too.
to figure
It's
it
like
out.
everything you're afraid of is simply something new that you need to learn, and
Yeah,
self-love helps
exactly.
build confidence. And
Yeah.
so if you think that you as a grown person can't figure out your finances, can't keep your how to make your own trains run on time, that is a sign of codependence. And one of the movements within psychological health is to refer to codependence as self-love deficit disorder. Now, it's a little bit clunky, and so I kind of don't use it, but it is a better description. Because if you are afraid of being alone, it is because you do not have enough self-esteem. And it is not like a judgment of you. You're not personing wrong. It is a stage in your development that is absolutely normal to have to be fulfilled. It has to be fulfilled by both men and women and people of any gender identification. Is you have to have enough confidence in yourself that because relationships can change over time. People can evolve and they can grow away from you. And we're very wedded to the idea of needing to have a permanent relationship as a mark of status and worth. And that does not convey worth to you. Your relationship does not convey worth to you. Your worth is absolute and within. And that is one of the roles of learning how to be single in a happy state is you will have more love for yourself, you'll have more confidence in your ability because you will find when there's nobody else there to take over the load, you'll be like, well, oh, turns out I can do that. And that is exactly what happened to me. I have been an incredibly independent person as a younger person because I had to be. And dysfunctional relationships in a familial setting, your growing up experience, will often engender in people the feeling of needing to solve another person's problems for them. So that's another form of codependency that I had to get over. And I took it in, well, I'll make it my profession. And that way it's less of like it's not part of draining relationships. And then I also found that when I had more energy for myself, I'm a really gifted problem solver, and that there really was not anything I needed another person for. And so when I am alone, if somebody wishes to be with me, I don't need them for anything, meaning they would have to be people who are actually right for me. And I'm not a unicorn. Absolutely everybody, that applies to absolutely everybody. And our relationship style is something that we learn from our nurturing experience. Our society plays a role in it as well because they want women to have children and produce more workers, and there really is, it's that simple. It's that simple. That is why you've had it tattooed into your brain that you're supposed to get married and have kids. It feeds into a structure that maintains a society. Now, what could also maintain a society is having robust social programs so that we don't worry about who's going to take care of the old people, because that's what Japan is going through right now as their birth rate has been declining. And in fact, younger generations have less and less of an interest in procreation because it's become more and more of a depleting thing as we are asked, particularly as women, to invest more and more identity into that role, which is a form of selflessness that leads to codependency. Too much selflessness will make you very dependent on your relationships to other people because you have engendered in yourself a poor relationship to self. And being single is one of the things that will rehabilitate and heal your relationship to self. Now, Bethany, you have also had relationships, you have also been single. What's your experience with your happiness factor and what goes on?
Yeah, I think for me, what kind of shifted for like as far as being in relationships, then being single, and then going back into relationships after being single for a while, what I really shifted was not just what I was accepting, but like actually getting to a point where I was choosing things about somebody or choosing the type of partner, or choosing even just like personality traits or attributes, or because when you're pulling in someone that you feel like you need or they're filling something for you, really foregoing a lot of choice. You're foregoing a lot of preference. You're really not even grasping the concept that you have the ability to be compatible on all these different levels. It's just so like bottom low vibration, need based, fulfilling these kind of lower chakra pieces. And you're not getting to the part of like spiritual compatibility or problem solving or conflict resolution. Like you can literally choose how you want to communicate with your partner and find someone who meshes with that style. Or the one that always sticks out for me was kind of the problem solving piece of when I have a partnership and I'm going through something or something's happening, I really like to have a partner that has kind of these like Leo, Aries, fire sign problem solving abilities where they're like, okay, here's some options. Let's talk about this. Or what do you think about that? Or like, I really like someone to kind of partner with me in this sort of action oriented fire way. And I think I may have shared it before, but I had partnered with a Libra at one point and he was just very passive. And so I was going through something like really like big, intense that needed decisions. And he was like, oh, I wish I was there to give you a hug. Like we were on the phone. And I was like, that is the most unhelpful thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, I do not want a hug. I want you to help me figure this out. And so that was like something I really learned of like moving forward, where it's like, wow, I can choose that in partnership. I can actually really make that a preference and have that compatibility with somebody. So it's not like something that I just have to accept that they're not doing something or interacting with me in a way that's beneficial or helping us elevate. It's not something that I have to just sit there and be like, oh, well, I guess this is okay because they meet these other needs. It's like you're bringing in someone almost exclusively based on preference, based on compatibility. You're not bringing them in based on any of these lower chakras. So you can actually bring them in from something that's really high levels of compatibility of like, okay, do we want the same things as far as like spirituality, as mission, as our messaging, our communication, and like, you know, because especially with long-term, you know, commitment partnership, you're likely to go through a lot of very intense things. You know, somebody's going to get sick, somebody's going to lose their job, somebody's going to have this or a family member pass or whatever it is. So this is what you're talking about when you're talking about long-term compatibility. You want someone who's going to be in your corner in the way you want them in your corner. Like if I'm having to like make some sort of like medical decision for a family member, I don't want someone to just like come give me a hug. I want you to like come with some facts and some like options. And I want you to hear what I'm saying and reflect back. Like I need you to be really active in that process. But I know people who would prefer the hug, would be like, I don't want you coming at me with all of this stuff. I just want to like emotionally process and then move on. But I'm an Aries. I don't process that way. That doesn't help me, in my opinion. So like, I'm sure there are lots of people who would love like to just have that moment, but I'm like, you are not helping me right now. Like I need this like very fiery approach to it. And so but that's me. That's the compatibility, that's preference. So I can choose that in my relationships. And I do choose that in my relationships.
Well,
And that's something that like you really can learn from being single and having those partnerships as learning experiences, and then being single and then moving back into a different partnership, you have a different mindset.
as a fire sign, you like someone who's pretty active, action oriented, and that makes perfect freaking sense. You were talking about cancers earlier, which are ruled by water, and that is a more emotional sign as well. Now, there are like astrology is not something set in stone. You can have a relationship with somebody that, you know, not everybody is typical. Some people are atypical within any grouping that they fall under the heading of. But it does make sense. And I am like you. I like it actually, somebody listening to my feelings does not do a lot for me because I actually really understand my own feelings very well.
Mm.
And so, and I'm very action oriented and very solution oriented in my approach in what I do. And that's also in my personal relationships. And so, even in my friendships, if somebody comes to me and wants to discuss something emotional, I'll listen. But like, I think it absolutely serves a function of, oh, this person is sort of emotionally purging. That's fine. And then we'll move to the solution part because it's just a part of my personality, and that is neither right nor wrong, but it is part of who I am. And that
Mhm.
is, again, the role of healthy relationships starts with a robust understanding of what your needs are, which is what you're describing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just getting very clear on that kind of stuff. And yeah, I love that you said that it's not about right or wrong. That's something I also really drill in with my clients. And again, I think astrology and energetics helps with that, because you're like, this is just like how I operate. This is how you operate. That's a very common Libra response. They're very passive generally. They're very like trying to figure out maybe what you need, and they're just a little bit more balanced in their approach to things. And so, and Aries and Libra are exact opposites on the chart. So that's part of that interaction, right? So sometimes they can work really well together. Sometimes they're too opposite. And that was a too opposite. He was far too passive for what I needed. But that again that's no shade for him. Like, somebody's going to think he is like the best husband material ever, but not me. Like, it's not for me. And same for, I'm sure in his mind, he was like, man, that girl is like pure fire. She's like all over the place. She is like so intense. And like, but I need people that meet me in that intensity. And those are my people, those are my tribe, and those are my partnerships. Like, I, really understand that about myself. And for a very long time, I would try to be more Libra in my approaches to things. But that just blows up, right? Like, you just have to acknowledge, like, it's okay. There's no right, there's no wrong. And you don't have to accept. And I think that really, that codependency, or just that not understanding what you really need, you might think, oh, I just have to accept that because that's just who they are and they're meeting other parts of my needs. But it's like, you can see how that really energetically is not going to mesh. And, yeah, like, could I have pretended that suited my needs? Could I have shoved everything down? Could I have pretended to go on with this relationship? But like, why? Like, we would break up anyway. Like, so what's the point of that? Then you're just extending your singledom, right? Because then you're going to be single again on the other side of it, because there's no way that would last. Like, we would have killed each other, or like, it just wouldn't have worked. And so,
Learn not to like each other, perpetuating a cycle.
yeah.
And that is called the repeat it until you repair it cycle. You will actually have a version of the same relationship over and over again until you figure out why.
Yeah.
And for you, you're figuring out why. It's great because you're not wrong, and thank goodness you didn't waste that guy's time and didn't waste your own time, because you are freeing him up, because there is somebody out there going, I would love that. I need
Yeah, absolutely. I had a friend when I was telling them that story, and they were like, "Oh, I wanted to give you a hug." I'm like, how does that not just like infuriate you? Like,
Exactly, me too.
that's just our style. Like, that's really why you and I get along so well. Like, it's just how we like operate. Like, I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with it. I feel bad for kind of mocking him, but like, he's lovely. He's a lovely guy. I'm sure he's like partnered up and happy and whatever. But like, yeah, that just like, that rubs me so wrong. It just,
I know it's irritating for people who are
it's
like,
so irritating.
want a battle plan.
Yeah, that's it. I want a battle plan. And so with things like that, I find, even if it's not their sun sign or whatever, I generally find people that have a little bit more of that fiery aspect, even friend wise, because I just realize, not that I'm not friends with people outside of that, but if I'm having something like that going on, I have kind of like my inner circle that I know they're going to be able to handle that intensity, and they're going to like provide feedback in a way that's going to be positive experience for both of us. Because I have friends that are more water sign, and I just like don't really talk to them about that kind of stuff in the moment. I might like process it with them later. But my inner circle are usually fire signs, the Leos. I have a lot of Virgo friends, because they're also very plan oriented. So like, even if they're maybe not that same fire intensity, they're a little more stable, but they're also very like in that moment, my emotions, I tend to process them a little bit later on the other side of something like that. If it's like decision time, battle plan, I want to know the facts, I want to know the understanding of it, I want to know what I need to do right now. Like, that's, but these are preferences. Like, this is how we operate as individuals, as energetics, and what puts us in our best. That's how I solve problems. That's how I get through my life in a really powerful, meaningful way for me. And so if I have somebody who's very water sign or very passive, you're actually like, that's actually holding me back from moving forward in a way that is going to benefit me. And this is also making them very uncomfortable, because they're not giving me what I want. So they're feeling that intensity, they're feeling that aggression, even of me being like, that doesn't help. That's not helpful. Like, and so they're like, okay, like, I don't know what to say, like, it's just not comfortable for anybody. And so it's like, But again, that's really getting into that singledom, that hermit mode, that being like, wow, this is like actually what I really want and what I really need, and how I can kind of set up my life to reflect that and not let people, not waste anybody's time and not let people in that are gonna rock that boat. Because what has happened in my past that was actually very detrimental is where I've had people who are a little bit more passive or quote unquote level-headed during those moments. And so they'll kind of like shame you a little bit of like, you're being really intense, or this is a lot, you're being so much right now, or I didn't sign up for this, or I don't know how to help your problem, or whatever it is. That's actually detrimental to me as a person too. That makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong. So you can see how, without having that certainty about it, now if somebody were to come at me with that, I would just say, like, no, we're just different.
Yeah.
These approaches are different. That's all it is. It's not somebody's wrong, somebody's right. But that
It's not
again
a
takes that
measure of worth.
internal.
It's not a measure of worth. It
Right,
is
exactly.
simply understanding who you are. And no matter what label we're putting on it, whether it's single or partnered or married or divorced or anything, what we're really talking about is, in order for you to have a beneficial relationship with friends, with family, with anyone who is in a romantic capacity, it starts with an understanding and acceptance of self, including working on faults sometimes, because like I can get ahead of steam. Now, I'm not actually a fire sign. Absolutely everybody thinks I'm a fire sign. I'm not. I'm an earth sign. I'm Taurus. But I always present, I even come out as the Queen of Wands in tarot. So I am very much from the same energy. And it is partially because I was raised with essentially no feminine influence. And I was almost entirely by myself. And so I was very solution oriented and very independent and very like, I have to do it. I have to. And so it's very action oriented. And what you're describing isn't just about understanding yourself, it's also about understanding this is an incompatible energy that will be pulled farther and further and further off balance if we continue around along this road together, which leads to bitterness, to unhappiness, and to the feeling of having wasted our time in something. But it
Mhm.
wasn't wasted time because it taught you this doesn't work for me. And
Right.
that's a big
Yeah.
role. That's a big role in having healthy relationships, is instead of expecting him to change, you were like, oh, this isn't working for me. I release you back into the wild to find that woman who just wants a hug. And there is
Yeah.
absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's not your compatible energy. And it isn't, when we're
100%.
talking about self-love, sure, you might have to learn how to soften your approach. God knows I had to sometimes because, balance is a good thing internally as well. Getting in touch with my emotions was a good thing as well. But you weren't blaming him for being in, like, that doesn't help me in terms of you're doing something wrong, but rather you're not the right person for me, which is different than thinking somebody else is wrong. And so you're not waiting for the other person to change to suit your needs. You're making sure you're seeking out the people who meet them without
And just
having to alter
being
who they are.
exactly, and just being very open and about that, because I think a cycle that I went through, and I definitely see it with clients all the time, especially some of the more intense signs. So they'll kind of push that down, thinking that it's wrong because they've been told it's wrong, or society pushes on it or whatever. So they push it down. So they're not presenting as that. They get in a relationship with somebody who thinks they're also passive or whatever. And then you can't hide that stuff forever. So it comes out, and then it's being sort of mirrored back to them again because they found someone who doesn't know this aspect of them and is like, wow, this is really intense or really reactive, or this is a weird way to process, or whatever it is, right? Like whatever you've shoved down, like you don't agree with them and you're fiery about it. And, you know, so they're mirroring back to you that it's a negative quality because you've hidden it from them. And so now they feel a little bit like tricked of like, wait, this isn't like what I thought you were like, or whatever. But if you kind of just allow yourself to present naturally, you're not doing anything. You're not pushing it down. You're not amping it up. You're just, just being and presenting and being honest about who you are and what you need. Then you attract the right people who are going to mirror back that positive aspect because, the fieriness and the way I process things, my close friends and clients love that about me. They're like,
Exactly.
thank God, this is like, I need you to like get me like on the right track, or I need you to and that's like what friends come to me for, is they're like, I have to be out of my house in a week and I owe $10,000 and I don't know what to do about any of this. And it's like, all right, let's go to work. Like we're
Boom,
gonna
boom,
figure it
boom. I got the
out.
boxes.
Yeah, like okay, I got some boxes. Like, but that's what Aries do. We're initiators, we're fire signs, that's exactly what we're supposed to do and how we shine. And so the people that are supposed to be in my circle around that love that. It's my magic, it's how I'm successful. But if I'm constantly shoving that down, and clients as well, if you're shoving that down, you're going to attract the people who are attracted to the shoved down version of you. And then you can't do that forever. So when that other side of you starts coming out, then they're like, whoa, like I didn't sign up for this. So you want to be sure that you're coming into these relationships being very honest about whether you're very passive, whether you're very intense, whatever your natural and true energetic is, because you can push it around, you can manipulate it, you can shove it down, but you can't do it forever. You just can't.
No, you can't be an
And
inauthentic version of yourself and expect to be
and why
happy.
would you want to?
Exactly.
Like that's tiring for everybody. And so yeah, I think it's exactly that. And the more time you spend being single, the more time you spend just in your own energy and in your own interactions, and that you're interacting with people around you without kind of this partnership sort of mirroring it. You're just sort of seeing it play out on your own. Like, how do I interact with people? What are my friendships like? What are my relationships with family or coworkers? Or how do I interact with the world around me or my own energetics? Now you're looking at being in that authentic alignment that maybe could bring in a higher level of partnership or not, or you're understanding like it's better that I'm alone, it's better I live alone, it's better I date casually. I mean, like I know a guy in his 50s and he just straight up, he was married for a little while and he was divorced, and I did a couple readings for him, and he basically was just like, I can't live with anybody else. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to. Like I like having my dog on the couch. I like putting my like feet up. I like not doing dishes. Like this, he was just like, this is how I live. And he has like, I don't know, lady friends, I guess you would call them, who will come and they'll date, and they might hang out, but he says right off the bat, like, I will not, and he will actually be in kind of a committed, like where he's not seeing other people, but he's like, this is as far as it's ever going to go. I'm not going to get married again. I don't want anybody living with me. This is how I want to live my life. And that honesty actually attracts the right people, because he has women who are like, works for me. I don't want to live with you either. Like, but they still have companionship and partnership, but they have
And friendship that goes
and
along.
friendship. And so it's like, can you imagine him trying to shove that down and trying to, pretend like, okay, you can move in, or like, okay, we'll get married, or whatever.
String them
It's like,
along so he can
no.
get something, he can get that companionship and that like pretending to be something that the other person wants, like happened to the guy in the Carolyn Hacks thing.
Exactly. Because
He
I
gave
think they
into
think
a
there's no
pressure.
possibilities other than this very traditional mode. But it's like, if you actually
Oh no,
step
there's
out
a
into that and
lot.
explore it, there's a lot of other people
There
that feel the
genuinely
same
are.
way.
They're generally, we need to remember that there is something in between, in a committed relationship and being a celibate monk. Like
Right. There's levels and
you can date
variations.
for the fun of it, for getting to know new people, to see what their lives are like, to find out what you are compatible with. And actually, I'd like to address that for a little bit. I'm not going to go into the specifics of my client, although like she's a very good friend and she would not mind this part. We were talking about a relationship that she had me look into, and she was aware that it's like there's a couple of things here that I don't think it's long-term compatible. Looked into the cards, it's like, yeah, this dude's not entirely over his ex. There's a couple of things, he's actually a little bit less mature than you are, a couple of other things. Not a bad guy. And she asked me, well, why should I continue with the relationship? And it's like, well, first of all, not all relationship, the goals of relationships is not permanence, because literally nothing is permanent. You're not permanent, our lives aren't permanent, nothing is permanent. Long term is only worthwhile if you truly have compatibility. Otherwise, you will have mounting unhappiness. And that is really hard to recover from. It can leave you with years of trauma, years of stuff to unpack. But there is worth in having a relationship because you enjoy the other person's company, knowing full well that when I stop or when we're ready to part ways, because this guy was going to go back to his ex, according to the cards. And by the way, pretty sure that happened. that you'll part ways without rancor, without depression, without anger, without a giant trauma suitcase to unpack. You will
Mhm.
part ways having had the fun of the relationship, understanding my expectation was not that we would grow old together, because I'm going to be really frank, this guy was nowhere near as bright as my client, nowhere near.
Mhm.
And she already knew it when she was asking me. He was a sweet person, but he was like eventually going to become threatened by that aspect of her personality, because she's a deeply intelligent young woman. And it's not that he was a dullard, or he's like supposed to be a dimwit or something. He just was more closer to average, and she is not. She is a far above average in intelligence. And over time, that would breed resentment. But for the time being, he thought he had achieved somebody so far outside of his league, and he just was having the best time with it. Now, it wasn't going to last, and it didn't last, but there was worth in having the experience for both parties. He got to be like, this type of woman could be interested in me, because she was. There were nice things about him. It wasn't long-term compatibility.
Mhm.
And it was worth having, because it was going to illustrate to that guy, I am not over my ex. And it was going to illustrate to my client, this is not enough for me.
Mhm.
Which, that's the role of the relationships that we have, is that are not meant to be permanent, is it shows you, like Libra guy, this is not long-term compatibility for me.
Yeah.
It took a shot, a kind of a flashlight on in my world, what I really need in a robust and a healthy relationship, who is somebody who's going to be on the same page. When we have a problem, it's not let's hug it out, let's plan it out.
Yeah.
And that's what works for you. That's what works for
Yeah.
you. And there's not one thing wrong with that. And in my own journey, I am single by choice. People still express interest in me. It's just that I know that there is, like, I'm like the insides do not match the packaging. I'm a little person. I look sort of delicate, all kinds of things. I don't mean that I have any form of dwarfism. I mean, I'm 5'3.5". I'm not a big person. Um, and I've had people express interest in me based on what I look like. And it's like, dude, if you got to know me, I am forthright. I am really able to state my mind. I'm self-directed. And like, nobody's going to budge me if I don't want to be budged. And that
There's the
is
chorus.
not what I look like. I look like it's a teacup, put it on a shelf sometimes. And
Mhm.
it's kind of that awareness of, you're reacting to my exterior, but when you got to know my interior, the idea that you would feel betrayed by it, because I was not socialized like other people, I have a very dominant energy within me, that it has to take somebody who's able to meet me at the same level, or else you can't help it. The person with the stronger personality starts leading the way, and that can
Mhm.
turn toxic really easily. And so I understand that it's a choice, but I understand fully that what another person would need to inhabit is, there's such a long list of, they need to be intellectually curious. They need to have some interest in the arts. Everybody needs to have diverse interests as well. But my interests are not just within spirituality, and it's a fairly rarefied list. And I need to be okay with, and if somebody doesn't inhabit that, I already do.
Mhm.
And that's enough for me, because I found how to just be happy and funny and laughing. And like, I practically sing and dance in the shower some days. I'm so happy. And it would only the right person is going to jar me out of that, is going to be
Right.
like, well, I should open up my life. Because the guy that you're describing, who's your client, he likes his life so much that he's already closed that door, and that's fine. He
Yeah.
knows it, he's conveying it. Nobody's like deceiving anybody here. If,
Right. Yeah.
if you're in a need-based place, you will find that type of person who will pretend to have similar views, and you won't spot it, because they want to have some, frankly, sex, companionship. They don't want to be entirely alone, but they do want to remain single. And
Mhm.
it doesn't make them evil. It just means they understand, I'm not good at this part. And that was a
Mhm.
part that I really had to go through, was looking back when I had this attraction to somebody who literally I was horrified in an intellectual place. I was horrified, going, he chain smokes, he drinks like a fish. he was overweight. There was a whole bunch of things that it's like, you're not a healthy human being. And I can spot that. Now there's a lot of good stuff to the person. So please, like, if it sounds like I'm just like, painting the person with a black tar brush or something, I'm not. It's just that there was so much unhealthy stuff that intellectually, my rigorous logical process was like, girl, no, there's just no effing way. What's going on here? I knew I had
Mhm.
something to heal, and I looked back at my relationship history and what it was teaching me. And what everybody's relationship history will teach them is that you will be drawn to people who fit the energetic behavioral pattern of a person who denied you a basic need during your formative experience. And I looked back, and I was married when I was very young, and then I was married again for like more than 20 years. Or I'm sorry, almost 20 years. Um, and I really, really understood that each of those partners, one was like my dad, one was like my mom, and this most recent person was like my grandmother,
Mhm.
who was my main caretaker when I was growing up. And I got that. When I got that, I was freed from it. I was like, oh my God, thank God, it makes sense. It's an
Yeah.
attachment issue. If you are
Yeah.
drawn to the wrong people, you have something to heal. And if you
Yeah.
heal it, then you're happy by yourself. You won't accept the wrong people, and you're far, far, far more likely to get the relationship that you want and stay in the relationship you want. And stating your needs and never ignoring what the other person is telling you about where they are,
Mhm.
please don't expect people to change what they want. It's not a mark of loving you, it's a mark of understanding themselves. If
Yeah.
somebody tells you they don't want kids, assume they are telling the God's honest truth and move on if you really do. If
Yeah.
somebody tells you they never want to get married, assume they are telling the God's honest truth and move on. Every now and then, someone will change, but it comes from within. And if they do it because they're trying to people please or society please, like Carolyn Hack's dude, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Nobody can inhabit a pretended version of themselves for long without it starting to curdle parts of themselves. They will not be happy. They will very likely start taking it out on you because they will have a subconscious resentment of, I changed to be around you because I did actually like you, even though I knew we weren't really super compatible. And I was like, well, maybe I can. And then I got into this, and I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't,
Yeah.
which is what happened with that
Absolutely.
guy. So, Bethany, you also counsel people through their relationship choices. Do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I think sometimes clients, or you see it a lot on like Reddit boards or different things, where they kind of say like, I was with somebody and they said they never wanted to get married, and then we broke up and they got married and they're super happy and all of the things. And they're like, so then somebody else is like, well, does that mean I should have stayed with them, or should I stay with my current partner who says that? And I feel like it's just important kind of to highlight with my clients. I'm like, listen, whether they don't want to get married at all or they don't want to get married to you, either way, you don't have to investigate which one it is. If they're telling you, I don't want to get married, just assume, just take them at their word, right? Because, and that does happen with people that they do change their mind with a different person.
Mhm.
But either way, it's not with you. So that's kind of, even though that can be a little bit of an ouch, you're like, okay, well, they married this person. Was I not good enough? It's like, it can just be a compatibility thing. I mean, it has nothing to do with
It's not
maybe
about
you
your
as a
worth.
person. Yeah. But either way, like, you don't have to investigate which it is. Like, if somebody is saying, I don't want to get married, whether it's at all or to you, just take it and be done. Like, that's fine. You don't want to be in a relationship. Okay, we don't have to go even that much further, because there's just really no point in figuring out what they mean if they're telling you kind of the conclusion is still the same, right? So yeah, that does happen. I mean, people do change their mind with different partners.
Yeah, and when you're healed, when you're healthy, if somebody says like kind of like, or if you're not the right person for them, you don't think of it as a fault within you. You just think of it as a compatibility issue.
Right, exactly.
And you move on without like dislike. Or the horrible thing that I see so often happen is that people with like an anxious attachment style go after people with an avoidant attachment style.
Right.
And it's mayhem. It's emotional mayhem, and people are always left with a lot of emotional scars to heal. And if you are happy enough being single, if you understand your emotional needs, if you know, hey, listen, what I'm really looking for in a relationship is somebody who really grooves on my personal company. And so I better learn how to do that first so I know what they're bringing to the table for me too. Because if you set everything on whether or not somebody else wants you and you take your self-worth from the act of being wanted, which by the way can happen to a lot of unwanted children, and it did happen to me. My mother just didn't want kids. And one of the things I found out as an adult, I only found it out within the last 5 years, is that in between my half brother, who is 4 years older and has a different father in a different country, he is Scottish. And he was born in Scotland, and I was not. I was born 4 years later in the United States. My mother met my father, who was a doctoral student in Ireland at that time, although he was not Irish. It's a long story. Let's skip that part. They ended up in the United States, and to get married to him, which she really wanted to do because she wanted to be in the United States, I was the anchor baby. Let's put it that way. And that really is honestly it, but it was the only reason I existed. And if I didn't look like her, she probably would have left me alone for the rest of my life. But when he died at 16 and I was living with my father, my mother wanted me back because, like most narcissists, she was like, oh, look at the thing I produced that looks just like me. And then she was very angry with me for being absolutely nothing like her because I'm really not like my mom. But what had really happened from that was quite simply that I had to learn how to not value the concept of finding being wanted validating.
Yeah.
And too many women in particular, I'm not trying to be gendered. And by the way, I have a guest coming up in the next couple of weeks. His name's Scott Grace, who talks about all of this from the masculine standpoint, what men have to heal, because men are also victims of this form of societal programming.
Oh,
Like the
yeah.
guy from Carol and Hacks, who knew darn well that, like, I don't really want to do this, but I did it because I thought I was supposed to, and it's not so much working out for me. Like, that's
Yeah.
what happens. Men have stuff to heal as well. And who knows, maybe if he heals everything, he'll be like, yeah, no, it would be really nice to be married when he's at a different stage in life. Or he may never get there, but he won't be trying to fit somebody else's expectations in order to be approved of or wanted. And so when I recognized that pattern within myself, it stopped holding any sway because I really did. Like, I went out on like 3 coffee dates like years ago, like, I mean, literally like 4 years ago. And every single one of the guys was super interested, and I was not. And I just took it as a like, oh, well, at least I know I have options. I know I have
Yeah.
options. And like I said, other people do occasionally express interest in me. I know it's something I'm choosing, but it has particular worth in my own journey because of the whole being left by my mom. Oh, the thing I found out was she had a baby in between. She actually was in
Oh, wow.
Ireland because she was having a baby that she placed for adoption. And finding that out was the thing that finally went, it's got nothing to do with me because she kept my
Right.
brother and she didn't keep me. And I found out that there was another person that she had done that to. And so it had absolutely nothing to do with me personally.
Yeah.
She
And
just
it never
didn't.
usually does, right? It's like all of our parents' stuff that they're working out and that they're,
Absolutely.
it's very
100%.
rarely about the child. I mean, it's not ever really
It's
about the
really
kid
never
doing
about the child,
something.
but it's absolutely natural and normal when when it feels like it is at first. It
Yeah, how
feels
could
like
it
it
not,
is.
right? Like when you're a child perceiving it in a very specific way. And that's what you're really looking at too, is like what is the core belief that it created? It's not even so much what the parent did, because you can have a parent do the same thing and 3 kids take it in different ways and create different belief systems around it.
Exactly, exactly.
So yeah, it's getting, I think, like you said, just getting at the core belief or pattern of like, wanting to be wanted and validated, which is like a very human existence need. So seeing kind of what is the pattern that you're playing out. And once you can kind of get at that base energetic, you can really start healing it or pulling it out or reprogramming it and reframing it. Because yeah, I mean, it has
Well,
nothing to do with the parent.
the societal undertone of women being asked to seek the approval of others through their appearance, through the way they comport themselves, through anything else, we are societally programmed to be people pleasers. And so what comes along with that is overvaluing the idea of somebody else's approval.
Yeah.
And being single and being able to inhabit that until the right person is by your side is one of the things that frees you from trying to earn somebody in a relationship, which is what we do in that whole avoidant and anxious attachment style. Is the anxious person is always like, I will earn your love because
Mhm.
I've been taught that that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
instead, you learn how to, like, that's what happened when, like, those three guys were interested in me, and I had just no interest, not even the tiniest bit. It's like, what's wrong with me? Because there was a couple, two of them were like, I should be, but why aren't I? And I realized that somebody else wanting me had no power over me any longer because I had resolved that.
Yeah. And
And
sometimes too, on the flip side of that coin, you can also learn from healing, like somebody wanting or not wanting you. On the other side of that, you're learning, like, if somebody is judging me or somebody doesn't want me, I don't care. Like, what does it matter? Because you've learned how to heal that within yourself and validate yourself and give yourself everything that you need. So whether somebody wants you or they don't, you're just kind of like, oh, that's cool. You want me? Oh, you
you
don't
don't
want
want
me?
me?
That's
I'll be
fine
leaving then.
too. Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. Like, I think about with the Carolyn Hacks one, article, and the guy talking about there was kind of this pressure, and it's kind of like if you step back and look at that, you're going, who cares? Like, who cares if you get married or not? Like, and I think when you can look at that, you can see it's very triggered reactions from people, because if somebody's that invested in your outcome, ask yourself why. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're genuinely happy, if you're genuinely stable within yourself, who cares? Like, I don't care if somebody wants to get married or not. I don't care what anybody else does. If it's not affecting me in some very direct way, I don't care.
Yeah, that's
So
that's looking for validation from an exterior source too, when you think
right.
everybody
So if
shouldn't
your
have that
parents
energy.
are
Yeah.
pressuring you to get married, it's like, why? What is that? How does that, so you can tell your neighbors, so you can post it on Facebook? Is that really a reason to marry somebody because your parents can post it on Facebook? Like, is that a reason to have a kid so that your parents can feel better about it?
Or
Or
they can have
your,
grandchildren.
or yeah, I mean, it's like, think about the
Get a
reason.
dog.
Yeah, like backpedal that reason. It's like, oh, well, I want to please my parents, but if is there a reason for that valid? Is there a reason? I mean, what difference does it make if you're happy being unmarried and you're fine with that, and
And
you're
you're
financially fine with that,
self-supporting,
and
and
all of the reasons to be single or whatever? Who cares? Like, why would somebody have such an intense reaction unless they were triggered by your freedom? You know what I mean? Like, you just have to backpedal that a little to see what is the actual reasoning behind this. And I think when you get to the core, you're like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to marry somebody so that this person can post it on Facebook. Like, I'm absolutely not doing that. Like,
what do you really think, Bethany? Tell us.
yeah, like that is just the reasons that you go through. Like, I know somebody who had kids at 22 because she wanted to be like a young mom,
Oh
like a
God.
hot mom, young hot mom. And it's like, think about what you've just done. Like, you created an entire
A
human being
human
so that
being.
it'll reflect a certain way on you. Like, these are the things that it's just like, if you can really get at the core of things, it just sort of breaks through the illusion, because otherwise it just feels like this big wave. But I think when you get at it, and it's just frustrating to watch people live in suffering, live in misery, live in this like type of slavery, being a cog in the wheel, because
It's
why?
conformity. What you asked, why would somebody care? It's because we are taught to value acceptance and conformity, again, by a societal template that tells us you need to be this, you need to be that, you need to be the other thing, you need to have this many kids, you need to have this type of house, you need to go to this type of house of worship. And they want you to fit into a box that they can shelve and use in the ways that they need to support an over-governing power structure. Now, that is just sociological fact, okay? That is not actually, that is like, you can go, there are so many different studies that talk about societal conformity, the needs for it, and why we are asked to inhabit these very narrow windows of how we are meant to live our lives in order to be considered a productive member of society. And that is, why do you care? Some people is like, that's how you become a productive member of society. Please remember, literally everything you believe about what you should do in your life is a result of societal programming. We need to wrap this up because we're going to run long if we don't. But Bethany, thank you so much for joining me. I want to share one thing that like only people who get interviewed on here know, is that this switches back and forth. When somebody is speaking, the camera switches to them. And I forget when I'm on other podcasts that some people have both people on screen the whole time. So I'll be over here gesticulating when like Bethany's making a good point. I'm like, oh yeah, on the nose, and yes, yes, that. And the other day I was on somebody else's podcast and had no real idea that I was also on camera. So there's all this footage of me being like, yes. And that's another indication of you need somebody in your life who matches your level of passion. Because when Bethany's talking about her fire, her drive, when I'm talking about you need a battle plan, don't come to me with the, oh, let's hug it out, because I don't need that. I don't need that. It's not a judgment of you, but it is not going to meet what my needs are within sharing a particular problem. I'm looking for advice. I'm not looking for somebody just to hear me. And there are many women who just need to be heard, and there are many men who just need to be heard. It's not absolutely a gendered thing, but you don't actually want to try and have a long-term compatible relationship with somebody who has a completely opposite emotional need within a time of crisis and disappointment. You won't be able, relationships flourish when they are able to take exterior pressure in a mutually beneficial way. And what you were really describing is something that was not mutually beneficial. But because you're happy, because you're healthy in a single energy, you were able to identify this does not work for me. And you let that person go to find the person who's like, I do need a hug, thank you. And
Yeah.
that would make them feel better. So
Exactly.
there's no right or wrong answer on this. We really did this episode so that people could begin to consider the simple value of why is inhabiting a single energy the thing that is most likely to bring you the love that you want? Because you will know how to be happy, you will know what your needs are, you will know that what does not make you happy, and you will not attempt to settle because you're trying to fit a conforming template that was superimposed on you to say, if you do this, you will have worth. Instead, you will find your worth within. Bethany, where can people find you to get your help?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just updated my website, so BethanyNicole.com, and it has the blog on there. You can buy the book, you can book sessions. I also launched my astrocartography, which is locational astrology travel blog, and that's followyourtrailofbliss.com. And that really focuses on kind of the locational astrology, which again is also kind of the energetics of relationships with location. So you can also book sessions, read about what it is, see the blog, how it relates to travel and travel astrology and all of that. So those are the two websites that are up and running. You can check out sessions, you can read more about all of what I do.
And she's
All
very
on
action
there.
oriented.
You're
She'll give you
really
a battle
ready
plan.
to get told what I really think.
And
Yeah.
I'm Alane, and you can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. I help people recover from their trauma, find their life's purpose, and inhabit their personal power. I also teach people some magic when they are interested in that as well. I practice celestial and angelic magic. I'm technically a high priestess in celestial and angelic magic, and I do some work outside of that as well. So we have slightly different focuses, but we both are very directed in our energy. Thank you so much for joining me, Bethany Nicole. This
Thank
was
you.
kind of debating the difference between being single and being partnered, and how being single can actually give you the best form of partnership in the long run. If you learn how to inhabit your happy energy by yourself, nobody else can ever establish it for you by themselves, meaning they also can't take it away with their actions, because it is an absolute within you that you know how to go back to. If the wrong person, like Mr. Huggy, is not right for you, when you released him, you were not bereft because you understood your needs and you understood how to meet them. And so you'll never waste time with the wrong guy again, or the wrong person, or the wrong woman. This is not a gendered thing. It is, although there is an overreaching societal pressure for inhabiting gender roles, which again, Scott Grace and I are going to go into some of that when we have him on. Everybody is different. And that is the other thing that's spending time by yourself. You will no longer be trying to join a group in order to have their approval. Instead, you will find your approval and sometimes what you also need to work on within. This has been Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Thank you so much for joining me.